Welcome to Great Chatwell's podcast. I'm Philip Allen. Contrary to popular belief, the Spice Girls 90s hit Tell Me What You Want, What You Really, Really Want wasn't penned by a CFO asking an MLRO for their shopping list of demands. But we thought it would make a nice segue into this audio excerpt taken from a recently live recorded webinar where former MLRO and founder of the Great Chatwell Academy of Learning, Byrne, shares with us what senior financial crime compliance professionals really need rather than what they think they really want to successfully lead their firm's approach to financial crime. You want to hear this podcast, so let's get to it.
I think the first thing to say in all transparency, we're a consultancy business. So it sounds kind of like ironic that we're saying, no, you shouldn't be relying on expensive consultancy, although I wouldn't think we were expensive. The reality is what we see is it's kind of natural. If nothing changes, then inevitably there's surprises and there's faults and there's risk and there's issues, and we have to deal with them quickly. And what I'm observing at the moment is that businesses are defaulting to sometimes expensive solutions, and they're putting a plaster over what may be a more underlying issue. And so for the reference to expensive and short term, I think major focus, what we're going to talk about now, is about the short term fixes, because that's where I see the opportunity. How do we get to the point where we're having to resort to short term fixes? Well, the reality is it's such a challenging role. I mean, I did it for 3.5 years at the bank, and my reflection was I'd be a far better MLRO now than I was then. I worked really hard. But the reality is, if a lot of us arrive into positions, they're not startup business. We take over someone else's work. We have to identify and quickly absorb what train tracks have been laid before us, assimilate where that's taken us, and then sometimes it takes us where we didn't anticipate because we really haven't had the time to go back and work out what's frankly going on from a visionary perspective. So I think the first thing is we're always playing catch up. We're always, unless you're very, very fortunate, most MLROs are juggling. I know I've got to be visionary, but I've got BAU and I've got a load of work to clear right now. That's the challenge. And that's frustrating, I think. As a consequence, you need help. You need resource. We need people in the trenches. And so it's almost like a just-in-time solution. Most of my customers are in distress. They're typically 166 businesses. There's an immediacy responsibility to that. So they are responding and reacting. And the problem is we don't provide all solutions, but my observation is businesses pay significant sums of money for what they perceive is a solution because it's been presented to them as a solution. And not always is it delivered that way. And therefore it sometimes falls short. You know, I think the other issue, the reason we go to external resources is because we don't have a sizable team. There's a finite number of people we're allowed to have. We're an FTE, you know, we're only at 5-10 people, depending on the size of your business. So we've got lots going on, lots of distractions, limited amount of our team, and we're fighting for a budget. I've not yet met an MLRO head of financial crime who says, I'm completely appropriately resourced, and yes, I have a wonderful budget that allows me to do what I need. And so these are the realities of the situation. Lots to do, limited resources. And I think when you talk about what's around the corner, the reality is we're so intent on dealing with what's in front of us, we don't have the time to put our head up and look what's on the horizon. Or if we do, we're not able to do that sufficiently to make sure we put in place and are able to anticipate that response. And one of the really important factors here is that most of our work now relies on technology. And we don't have a lot of change. We don't have a lot of time to change. So, you know, we're seeing regulations that are being implemented and they take effect almost the next month. Well, the reality is you've got to go back to your IT team and say, look, I need this. And they're going to go, look, there's a whole load of tickets to work here. Why didn't you tell us earlier? And so then we do is we buy an IT resource and we buy in a solution that someone else has ready made when we could have done that in-house and tailoring it. And here's this competing problem. Do I outsource and try and get someone who's a third party to come in and help me address this issue and assimilate into my business? Whereas actually the in-house development, where the skills exist or we've anticipated or had time to train and upskill and reskill, provides a far more tailored solution. Outsource, yes, immediacy. Yes, there's apparent qualification, but do they really understand my business? As opposed to in-house, I just haven't had time to upskill and reskill, but actually that would be my preferred option if I'm honest.
As a head of learning, I would say this, Lee, wouldn't I? But humour me for a moment on this. Requesting budget to upskill and or reskill your people in the prevention of financial crime must be an easier sell than petitioning for funds for a new tech stack, right?
I love the phrase that we were looking at the design of this, and you came up with something that was quite ecologically friendly. Grow your own. I love that phrase. You grow your own talent and resource. And I think given where everybody's talking about sustainability and environmentally friendly and what have you, I think when you actually truly analyze the learning needs of our staff and those who are supporting us, and more selfishly ourselves, then I think that's the real opportunity here. Going off a little bit of a tangent, when was the last time you sat down or were able, as a head of financial crime, to truly determine, document what your learning needs were on a personal level, and then to have the time to go and find the appropriate solution? I think there's two levels here. There's us, and we should be selfish as a head of financial crime because we are critical. And then it's taking that down and cascading that to our respective teams. I think this is the massive opportunity. I just do. And it's something that I've been thinking about and watching now for 7 years.
Of course, technology has a significant role to play, but it's got to be the right technology that's put in place. Yeah?
I'm 55 for the record. Am I the most appropriate person to guide and influence and determine technology requirements? Probably not. Probably not. We've got people who are more gifted, etc. Nonetheless, have I objectively spent enough time looking at technology and understanding what's available? No, I haven't, if I'm honest. And that's my point of self-reflection. You know, often I would rely on the IT team to determine and divide what type of technology is an appropriate solution for me. And I would take their advice. But have I and do we take enough time to understand what's out there? Now, I know, you know, from our perspective, we've done a little bit of research and we've identified more than 400 different types of RegTech solutions that are available right now. 400. So how do you work through that on a procurement basis? How do you refine that to 3 to 5 solutions that hit the mark? I think this is a big challenge. Now, my observation is at the moment, how do you get upskilled to understand technology and guide through that process? Now, there are some do it better than others. But the vast majority of us will kind of just look around and go, okay, what names do I know? What names are hit my inbox, my mail inbox? Okay, let's form a beauty parade and let's take the best of 3. And that's pretty much how it's working. So I don't see at the moment as much of an opportunity or much of a solution being provided for us, which is, you know, almost like assembling, aggregating and consolidating all of the tech that's available, which in itself is a business idea that we've talked about, because it's hard. And so I've got my budget. I need technology. Where do I go now? And then you start a beauty parade. And that's a challenge.
Too much reliance on legacy tech?
I think there's 2 parts to this. One is, inevitably, when you arrive in a role of responsibility, you are at the behest and you're beholden to what your predecessor and their predecessors have done. And so there's an inevitable fact and reality. You have to take forward what you've got today. But I think the opportunity then is to look for incremental gains, how you evolve that process. Now, in order to do that, you've then got to go back and look at the technology and say, what exactly is this doing? How many rules are being run here? And when we talk about effectiveness, do any of those rules actually achieve what I'm looking for from a fighting financial crime perspective? And so there's a piece of analysis here that's required around the technology. We hear stories about major businesses, and I'm talking tier 1 banks, who are able to afford a £1 million contract to a big 4 to completely re-engineer their processes. Because frankly, it's easy to do that, to try and work and understand what's already been done before. So they just pick it up, replace it, and put something back in and learn a new process. I kind of learn now why that's happening. But for most of us, we don't have that size and significance. So we start with what we've got. The little type of steps there is to review the contract and when that renews and start to consider how you form the beauty parade, start to identify potential solutions and have the technology providers come to you with the opportunities. Get them to tell you about technology. rather than have to spend hours and hours online. I think that would might, an alternative there. In summary, the first one is looking at themselves and their training needs really objectively. And the second part is the technology, because it's absolutely critical to our success going forward.
Thank you for listening to this audio extract taken from the full webinar, How Highly Effective Senior Financial Crime Compliance Professionals Balance the Competing Pressures of Commercial Objectives, Limited Resources and Regulatory Responsibilities, which you can download and watch on demand through the Resource Centre on our website, greatchatwellacademy.com.